Hi, friends, and welcome to the Homeschool Journal. Today, we are going to do a two-part podcast. We have so much to cover in grades 3 through 6. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about all of our curriculum in those grades, the trajectory of the curriculum in those grades, and what it is that we want to accomplish developmentally and within the skills of the students that you are training at home. Now, to do this with me today, we're going to have Michelle Tefertiller, who is our Director of Primary Education both for Memoria Press and the Classical Latin School Association. Now, you say primary, but let me tell you, Michelle has many years of experience across all the grades of our curriculum, including the years that her own students, spent time here at our model school in Highlands Latin School. So stay with us today for just part 1, which is grade 3. It's a big leap, a great and wonderful developmental year, and I look forward to talking to Michelle about this. We're going to jump into our podcast.
Welcome to the Homeschool Journal, a show that unpacks the joys and journeys of the classical homeschool family. Here's your host, Carrie McGraw.
Okay, friends, so today we're here again with my friend, Michelle. Michelle, thank you for being with us.
Of course.
Yes.
I'm delighted to be here.
Well, you know, I had hearkened back to our K-2 episode that we did in season 1, and that was all about those critical skills in the primary years. And we are here now. We're going to jump off of that. We're going to take that next leap, literally, into third grade, almost literally into third grade, and talk about grades 3 through 6. You know, we're finishing out these grammar school years, and they're just as important, and yet parents can feel still some trepidation in these years, some confusion in these years. So what we want to do today is focus on these 4 grades. And as we go through them, Michelle and I have some notes here with us, and we have to today because it's a lot of material.
Right. We don't want to forget anything.
No, I don't want to forget anything. And of course, I think I've made jokes about my age. I won't do yours, but I can forget everything. And if it's not written down, that's going to put me in trouble. But so in our notes, we have the list of all the curriculum. So when we go through each grade, I'm going to take us through, or you'll kind of help me list all of our curriculum. Okay. And then we're going to talk about what we want out of these students academically and developmentally, these goals for each of these grades. Okay. So starting with the third grade, I think you and I would both agree it's a big leap year.
It is a big leap year. And we are transitioning from that primary school to the grammar school. So the jump is big. And I don't think there's anyone who's used our curriculum that has been like, has said, third grade's no big deal.
Yeah,
It's just an easy transition from second grade because it is a big jump.
It is.
We go from only having quizzes really in spelling, and we have a few in Prima if you're doing Latin in second grade.
If you're doing Latin.
Latin in second grade. So they just have a few subjects in which they are actually doing a quiz or a test to almost every subject has a quiz or test in third grade. And not only that, some of the subjects have unit tests or end of the year cumulative test. So it's quite different. It's quite different. And you're not just learning the tools of reading and writing, you're also learning how to deal with that information, how to use these tools that you've learned.
You know, I've said that parents at all times when you're homeschooling, you are training a student. You know, even if you're pre-K, and we talked about that in that previous K-2 episode last season, you know, you're training a student all the time, but third grade is where that student is learning the skills to start training themselves. Now, just beginning.
Yeah.
It's just the very beginning. But you're right about that big leap in the curriculum. And I think, honestly, I think a homeschooler would find that in any curriculum. It's very poignant in classical, you know, homeschooling. But, you know, the beautiful thing about that leap into third grade is you start seeing the full trajectory of the Memoria Press curriculum. And it's really exciting. There may be some trepidation, but it's really exciting as well. So let's get into, let's list this third grade curriculum. Okay. And we've got to pull our lists out here, right? So where do we start here in our core curriculum for third grade, Michelle?
We're going to start with literature. So literature is going to be all chapter books, coming off of second grade, where we ended the year with Little House in the Big Woods and then the Beatrix Potter set. We're going to begin the year in chapter books, and we're going to continue with Farmer Boy, which the students are familiar with those characters from second grade. But the chapter books get progressively more challenging. So Farmer Boy to Charlotte's Web, both familiar stories to Paddington, familiar characters, and then Mr. Popper by the end of the year. So challenging chapter books that are, advanced.
It is a leap. It is a leap for parents to expect that.
It is a leap. And so we don't want parents to get discouraged, but just knowing that leap is coming and that you can take your time with those books.
Right.
Take your time with the literature. Your child may still be needing some help decoding here and there. So they'll need pronunciations here and there, which is fine. Help them to try to help coach them through that decoding still if they need that.
Because they're going to still need it. I don't want parents to come into third grade thinking, oh, we're going to hit the ground and you're going to read all the Farmer Boys, sitting right there by yourself. That's not.
You still need to be reading with your child in third grade.
For a long time, not just third grade, fourth, fifth,
even sixth. You want to listen to your child read.
That's right.
For portions of their books.
So parents also shouldn't panic if we're entering this year and you are still working on the decoding skills. I just want our parents to hear that. Right. And that's okay. So let's take a pause from literature just for a second.
But about that decoding, if they've used our program, they'll have the tools they need to help their child should they need decoding practice in those chapter books, even though we don't lay out phonics anymore for you. There will be no help with phonics other than spelling. But you'll have the tools you need.
Right. And that's one of the things that I wanted to just say for a moment here is that we are done with that phonics. That really, that structured study of phonics is over.
We've introduced them to all the phonograms of English. They've had practice reading with them, spelling with them, dictating them. And so really they are ready to just practice reading and using them.
Because they're also going to do in other subjects some more that expository material.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. This is where we really start with expository material. They read a little bit in second grade, story Great Americans for Little Americans and Patterns of Nature, but that was just a little smattering of information. But you're going to be reading in the Golden Children's Bible in this year for Christian studies. You'll be reading portions of the mammals text. Now, not all of it. Some of it, mom or dad or whoever's teaching will need to help read as well. But they should be reading a little bit in Greek myths, a little bit in the Golden Children's Bible, a little bit in mammals.
The point is, it's been introduced to them just a little bit in second grade, the end of second grade. And now is when we really start stepping into it. Again, it's a slow step, though.
It's a slow step. They should not be expected to read an entire section on the mammals or the story of Zeus or any of that.
Sure.
They should just read a paragraph or two.
Sure.
Maybe your child just starts by reading a sentence or two. That's right. Okay too.
It is.
And then whoever the teacher is reads the rest. But we want them to have that practice of reading expository material, reading for information. It's much more challenging than reading to follow a storyline.
Perfect. And that's, we want to spend that time and emphasis on literature, but here we go back to the curriculum for third grade. So we've come off of literature, math.
Math is going to get more challenging this year. We're going to introduce multiplication and division. Now, we say we introduce it, but really your child has been skip counting all through kindergarten, first and second grade. And so by the time they reach third grade, multiplication isn't new. We're just giving it a different name. We're not calling it skip counting anymore. Right. We're actually using the mathematical signs, and we are multiplying and also dividing. So mastery of those two operations is the biggie for third grade.
And every one of my children absolutely had so much fun with multiplication because they had been introduced to it so appropriately. And all of a sudden it starts to click and they understand, oh, goodness, I do recognize this.
I can know
do this. And just the sheer joy of the memorization, which of course is another hallmark of classical schooling and of course of Memoria Press, but they've loved it. You know, they get quite a bit of excitement out of that.
And third grade is great in that the child's memory is still expanding.
Mm-hmm.
So even third, fourth, fifth, even sixth grade, their memorization skills are phenomenal at these ages. So there will be a lot of memorization within the program, and that's by design.
I could use a little bit more of that myself. But
The benefits are excellent, as you mentioned, for math. Growing up, I don't remember skip counting in school at all. We did not stand. We didn't skip count. But in third grade, we were forced to memorize our math facts, and you just had to memorize them.
Mm-hmm.
It was much harder by then. So having that natural flow that the program provides into the math at this level is really
wonderful.
great.
So then we might introduce, and you don't have to, right? Greek myths is an option.
Well, we do want to introduce at least half of it this year.
Sure.
There are so many components within Greek myths that are key for cultural literacy within so many of the books that your student will read in some this year, but in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, you will begin to see those references within your literature. So we do want to start introducing the students to the characters of Greek myths, the gods and the goddesses, their symbols. And even if we only do half of the program this year, that's fine.
Which really helps. I mean, if you need to slow it down a little bit,
slow it down,
right.
Take your time with it. As long as you're doing it well and you're mastering the information, I think that half of it this year is fine. And we also say that you could do half of some of the other subjects that are introduced in third grade as well, which is one of the benefits of the Memoria Press moderated program.
Mm-hmm. So then you can also introduce Latin.
Yes, we suggest you do.
Yes,
we
exactly.
suggest you do. But again, if you want to wait a year, and that's fine too. I mean, really, you want to do what's best for your family. And some families may say, we're all in. Let's start Latin and Greek myths and we'll get it all done in 1 year. And then life happens and you find that, really while you were ready to do it all in 1 year, maybe your child wasn't. Or maybe your child was ready and there are some life things that make you need to slow it down. So we do have the option of half a year for several subjects. Greek myths, Latin is one.
Which would be Latina Christiana in this year, right?
English grammar, recitation, so the English component. States and capitals is another one we'd say you could do half of. And the poetry and timeline program. You could do half of those in third grade and then the other half in fourth grade.
Okay, so we're still working on cursive in third grade.
We are working on cursive, and they're practicing in their cursive book, copying states and capitals, for instance, maybe some Greek gods and goddesses. But the cursive does progress through the practice in their books.
And this is the year that we really want cursive to become very natural. The primary, by the end of the year, I think it's the primary form of writing, and manuscript kind of really falls off.
Yeah. Manuscript has been gone.
Yeah. So cursive is really very important in third grade. It's going to set you up well for what's to come.
Not only is it going to set you up well, but it's going to relieve a lot of hand fatigue because in third grade, the amount of writing that we do really increases.
And cursive is necessary.
And so cursive helps to not only the student to relieve some of that hand fatigue that can happen from writing, but also allows them to write more.
Right. Well, and fast and get more done.
Yes.
So, okay. So now we start also introducing composition.
Yes, we do. So we suggest All Things Fun and Fascinating in third grade, which is a writing program by IEW that covers the keyword outlining. So it is a great introduction to composition, and third grade is the perfect place for that. Yeah, because in the primary grades, we really don't want students composing anything. Their spelling isn't great. They don't have a lot of life experience, and they don't really have a lot of interesting things to say at that point because they don't have a lot of life experience.
It's just hard for them.
And so we can eliminate any of their stress at having to come up with something to say. by waiting, by just holding off writing and composition really until third grade.
Right. Okay, so then you've already mentioned, we talked about poetry and timeline, and I think these are some of the really neat things that we step into in third grade, again, harkening back to the fact that it's a leap, and when we introduce timeline, this new concept for children that is, I think, very developmentally important. The other thing that we do is, we introduce a lot of the guidebooks. They start to see the pattern of the guidebooks that they're going to continue to use.
Right, and they're similar. So the format for their Christian studies workbook and the format for their science workbook will be very similar. In their Greek myths workbook, they'll have facts to know
and literature
and vocabulary and then comprehension questions. So they'll begin to see the format, and students love knowing how something is going to go.
That's
so
right.
They love that
Dependability.
That's a good word.
Of where they're going and how they're going to get through the material. So it's not only that they're just learning new material, but they have a place to put it and they know where it's going to go and they know the structure by which they're going to be learning it. And that is comforting, I think.
Right. And built into the teacher's manuals for those subjects, especially for Greek myths, I know that they have indicated in the teacher manual which questions in which vocabulary will be on the quizzes and the tests that the students will be taking. And so that's not so that we're studying towards those tests or quizzes. It's to help train the students how to study. So what we're doing is we're actually showing them that when you have a scope of material, you don't have to know everything in that scope of material. There are ways to
pick out the most important
things. And so we're just like everything else, we're showing them what are the most important things in these chapters and these words and questions.
And again, that dependability, knowing what's coming and understanding the format by which we're going to learn and attack the material.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the material and we've talked about the curriculum, and I know I'm going to say this, we're going to end up spending most of our time here on third grade because it is that big of a pivotal year. It's a pivotal year in material and curriculum. It's a pivotal year, though, developmentally. So let's talk a little bit more about the specific skills that we see our students stepping into in this year.
Okay, so let's start with reading. So when the student is reading at this level, we know it's still developmental and they may have some decoding needs still, but their oral reading should have more expression by this stage. So if you're not having your child read out loud, there's no time better to start than now. So have them read out loud and practice reading with expression, because that's how they're going to get expression, is by hearing it read with expression. So when you're reading out loud to your child, read with expression. Yeah. In fact, in the primary grades, we over express for that very purpose as a model. So reading with expression is expanded, and the comprehension discussions are important because we're answering comprehension questions. And as the child progresses from third through sixth grade, the discussion is going to become more critical, the discussion before the answer. So it's not just what's the answer, write it on a board and copy it anymore. We're still having that format, but the discussion needs to be more involved. Robust. Great word.
And that's and each year you should see a progression. And then I know we're jumping forward a little bit, but this is the beginning. Again, we're at the beginning of this. And so, orally discussing those comprehension questions, I think, and treated always almost more important than how many they actually wrote out.
Right.
I know maybe
they need to write a few. They still need to be writing some.
They really must, because the sentence structure, utilizing sentence structure, is just as important of a skill. And answering in complete sentences. This is where we really start that heavy expectation to give mom, the teacher, a complete sentence for this answer. I'm using part of my question in my answer. So, but it all stems from good discussion.
And because you're doing comprehension questions in many of these subjects, that discussion is going to be important.
Absolutely.
So, and then their cursive needs to be lovely and legible. And they're at an age now where they can actually look at their writing and say, is this my best? So before you just accept a workbook, ask, is this your best writing? Have you looked over your work with a critical eye? Have you made sure you started every sentence with an uppercase letter? Do you have an end mark? Mm-hmm. Is your penmanship what you want it to be?
And it's okay. I wouldn't do this all the time, but I did do this. If something was submitted to mom that wasn't acceptable, either in sentence structure or in legibility, it had to be rewritten. I wouldn't make them rewrite an entire lesson by any means, but there had to be some type of accountability to mom knows this wasn't your best work. So we're going to take this sentence and we're going to rewrite this. And it might have been on a separate notebook paper because I didn't want it messy in the book or any messier than it might have already been.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think it's fine to set that expectation high and to know that at some point you will need to say this is not acceptable, because a child will give you sometimes just the very minimal to see what you do.
They are pushing the envelope or testing the envelope, right?
They can.
Okay, so what about recitation?
So they still there's recitation in many of our subjects. Of course, that's part of our model: recitation, review, introduction of new material, and comprehension questions. So recitation should still be an important component. Take it seriously. Don't just allow them to lay on the floor and recite. I would say to have recitation be kind of formal. I know we don't like the word formal, but have them stand up and have them stand up straight. Be sure that they are enunciating their words. Even your students that are very good with recitation, those students sometimes are harder to rein in because they want to go so fast. OST, musti, sunt, or they start rolling through those Latin endings. And my old ears can't hear that fast. So slow them down. Have them slow down to a pace that is
manageable.
A good pace. Right. And so especially with things like poems that they're reciting or memory verses they're reciting, the recitation is no good if they are going through it so fast that no one can enjoy or ponder the words they're saying. And, it culminates in 6th grade with Horatius at the Bridge. If they are flying through that, it just is not good. They need to hear and be able to recite slowly and carefully.
We had recitation. We held recitation for grandparents. So that
is a wonderful idea.
They had to practice, so that grandparents could enjoy and understand.
Right.
All right, let's keep going. So some of the other skills that we've got here, they're going to accomplish our states and capitals, right?
You need to be able to find all of those on the state, know the capital.
Identification.
Spelling, we'll give a little bit on spelling this year, but when we go over this in 4th grade, the spelling needs to be there. So some of your students, the natural spellers, they'll get it this year. That's great. Doesn't mean you don't have to do it next year.
Right. But if we don't have spelling,
that's okay.
We're going to revisit that. Okay. And then what else are we studying for tests?
We're learning how to study for a unit test. So that's different than a quiz where you learn a small chunk of material that you're then quizzed on Friday. That's great. But we have unit tests where we have 5 chapters at a time that we have a review test for. So the child needs to learn how to not only learn that chunk of material for that week, but then also to review last week's chunk, or maybe up to 4 weeks worth of chunk of material. So they need to practice that review and learn that to study for a large test, you've got to have a daily review of past material, maybe not daily, but surely weekly review of past material to stay fresh.
This is so key. This is this is why we're spending a lot of time on 3rd grade, because this is the beginning of how we are continuing to train our students to be students. And this type of training in study skills is really important and comes into play for the rest of their duration as a student, even going into college.
Right.
This is something that is a foundational year and a foundational skill that we've introduced it previously with, I think, recitation, going back to recitation, continuing to harken back to all the things that we have memorized. In K-2, we do some of that, but here in third grade, now you're doing it for assessments.
Yeah, for an assessment.
That's right.
And you're right. This is the beginning of practice of a skill that they'll use the rest of their lives. I love index cards. It's great to have them, use index cards as practice for their vocabulary. I know today we have Quizlet, which is a great tool, but
it's not the same.
It's not the same as when you write it. And I'll tell you that my adult children in college, they will still make flashcards.
So do mine.
On index cards.
So do mine.
So it's
and take paper notes.
Yeah.
It's just it really well. Okay, folks, if you want to go back to the importance of writing, you can listen to one of the podcasts in season 1 with Miss Hatfield. Not only on cursive writing, but what it does for the brain.
Right.
It is so important. Okay, so one of the last big things in third grade makes everybody groan, and that's grammar.
Grammar.
Maybe it doesn't make you groan, but I know it makes a lot of parents
love grammar.
groan.
But if you started Latin with us back in second grade with Prima, this won't be such a big issue. Because in Prima, we study the parts of speech in English so that when they actually begin the formal study of Latin in third grade, they already know those parts of speech. They're just getting more practice with them. Now, they didn't master them by any means in second grade, but they were familiar with them. So we get more practice with them. Plus, if you think about capitalization and punctuation, we've been since first start reading in kindergarten, working on how do you end it, the ways you can end a sentence, and various punctuation marks through copybook program. We talk about colons and semicolons, and of course they don't have perfect use of them, but they know what they are. They're not completely foreign to them. But so some of the topics that will be covered in English grammar recitation are not new. No. They are things that have been infused in the program in previous subjects.
But again, they're being put into a new learning format, more formal.
Right.
Than what it is that they've had before.
It's recitation.
Right. Right. And then they're using it and they're writing it on the page. So it's engaging all of these learning senses and needs, and for things that they really do need to memorize and really do need to just retain so that they use properly. So it does begin that grammar study. We do begin that. And like you said, if they've used Prima, they've been introduced. But what about the family that hasn't? We've chosen to just kind of hold off on Latin maybe a little bit. We don't want to hold off for very long. That's a core. But what about that family that has held off a little bit?
Well, that's okay. You can still begin the English grammar recitation program with level 1, where we just cover, capitalization, punctuation, and but much beyond that, really, English grammar recitation was designed to work in chorus with the Latin program.
That's right.
So if you are deciding not to use Latin, I would say you probably need to supplement with an additional English grammar program and not just rely totally on English grammar recitation.
But that's something that we will work with families on.
Sure,
and, I really
we have lots of ideas.
That's right.
We have lots of ideas for
families that jump in the middle, we are always willing to sit and work with them and see how we can make that transition in much more smooth, and make sure that we are, going back and just solidifying anything that it is that they might not already have.
Right.
And taking the time to do so. And families, I hope, would not be.
We'll still try and sell them on the Latin, though.
Oh, well, I'm not. That's no joke. That's no joke.
Because when there's a best way, there's a best way to learn English grammar, and the best way is to study Latin.
Correct. So let's talk about, just for a second, before we go on to fourth grade, because this is a question I have that, while it applies to every grade, if you find yourself needing to, as I call it, take a pause. Mom has had a new baby. There's been an illness in the family. Something that just throws life, off kilter. What are the core things? If you've got to pause and slow down for a period of time, what are the things we really, really need to focus on and not lose ground in? And yet there are others that can just be set aside for a period of time. So
right. So the things that you want to continue working on, even when times are hard or when you need to let some of the other things go. keep up with your literature, your math, and Greek myths.
Okay.
And that's if you're not doing Latin.
Okay.
I would stick Latin in there too.
I would too.
So because they're going to be doing cursive in those programs, so you could drop the cursive for a period of time. The formal cursive.
Right.
The timeline, you can catch up on that. States and capitals, you can catch up on that too.
And you can catch up on EGR, or the English Grammar Recitation, at this stage.
Right.
At this stage, you really can.
But your literature, your math, your Greek myths, and your Latin, you want to try to continue those 4 things. And that shouldn't take a large portion of your time.
And I want to say to a parent, if that means in that time that, you're not testing in these subjects, particularly maybe Greek myths, it's okay.
Yeah.
Really, life is very important, and harmony in the family is very important. Yeah. And making sure that all the little ones around you, or the bigger ones around you, are well taken care of. Thank you so much for joining us today for part 1 of our grades 3 through 6, studying the grammar school years. I hope that you feel encouraged and equipped to challenge the 3rd grade year after our time spent with Michelle today. Don't forget to come back and visit with us for part 2, which we will release very soon, and we will cover grades 4 through 6 to round out our grammar school years. Thanks for being with us again here on the Homeschool Journal. Thanks for joining us today. If you liked our episode, click the thumbs up button below or leave a comment to let us know what you thought. It always helps us to know if we've helped you. You can also click the bell icon and subscribe to the show so that you can stay in touch. Then I'd love for you to share it with a friend. We have many resources here on this channel, so I hope you'll check those out too. I'm Carrie McGraw. Thanks for listening today, and I'll see you next time.